Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the Give Yourself Goosebumps series, and it's book number 18, Attack of the Beastly Babysitter. Now, for starters, this book was one of the many Give Yourself Goosebumps books that I never read as a kid, so this was a first time read as an adult, and going into this, I heard many across the board opinions about this book. From Michael Goosebumps fan, I'm plugging him, said that this is one of the worst Give Yourself Goosebumps books ever. And from Spongy444 and a friend of mine, BD Horror, who I talk, both of them are friends of mine, and I talk to them quite often in the Discord chat, said that this is one of the best Give Yourself Goosebumps books. And after reading this, y'all, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of in the middle of opinions here. I think it's good for what it is. I do think that this book exemplifies some of the greater strengths that Give Yourself Goosebumps books can bring in terms of gameplay. But in terms of story, there's some things left to be desired. But that's just me and that's just my taste. But we'll get into all that after the plot overview without giving too much away. So off the bat, if you haven't read this before, you should try this. There might be something in here for you that you might enjoy. I could definitely see a lot of you out there who watch my videos all the time, or maybe some new viewers or new subscribers out there watching. This could do it for you. All right, so let's talk about Attack of the Beastly Babysitter. So, in Give Yourself Goosebumps, you are always the main character. You are leading the story, and you often have these side characters accompany you as you encounter these over-the-top villains or over-the-top scenarios, and you get about 20 endings per book, right? And Attack of the Beastly Babysitter goes in the more traditional route where you end up at a certain point of the book and you get to go down two different paths. That seems to be the most common thing here. And the story starts off with you and your brother, who's way younger than you, that you call Stinko, are left home one night as your parents leave to go out for the night or a few nights. And they call this babysitter company called Kids Care to come bring a babysitter and watch you guys for the night. Now, the mom told you and your brother that there's a woman named Mary Ellen coming to watch them. But when they see the babysitter that arrives, her name is Zoe. And Zoe has a weird rat tattoo in her ear. And this kind of catches you off guard, and you start asking your brother Stinko, like, okay, well, what's going on? And Stinko gets a phone call, and he answers it, and it says that Mary Ellen's going to be late because she got in a car accident. So you put two and two together that Zoe is not supposed to be your babysitter. And once you get to that point, it takes you down this route where Zoe proposes to you that tonight's going to be a night of fun or games. If you choose to have fun, you get to go down one route with Zoe. But if you choose games, there's a whole other character that comes out of the woodwork named Dare. And Dare takes you down the game's arc. Now, when I play these Give Yourself Goosebumps books, I usually try to play both arcs, honestly, here. And the first arc that I ended up in was the games arc. And the games arc has, like I said, the leading villain of Dare. Now, this book has a function to it that I thought was pretty neat. Well, actually multiple functions, but the main one is the spinner function where in the back of the book, and there's this giant spinner reel where you put like your finger down and you spin like a paper clip, and if it lands on one option or the other, depending on what part of the wheel you need to be looking at, that's the path that you choose with Dare. And utilizing this game function will take you down a few paths with Dare. The main one is that he takes you out to a desert where there's a giant black hole in the middle of the desert, right? And Dare has these tattoos across his whole body that come to life and that act kind of like boss monsters in this like adventure side story games, or mini side story games that you end up going into. And that stuff is kind of cool at first, and it starts off really cool, but it ends up kind of fine because the black hole, you know, you have this like this sand blob monster, right? That seems kind of cool, but then it shifts into if you go down the black hole, it takes you to one path that will bring you to a dragon, right? And you have to essentially do a slay the dragon side quest. And then another one takes you down to a path where you end up holding freeze ray guns, and you end up freezing yourself, your brother Stinko, and Dare. And there's another, when you go down the freeze ray option, there's another game function where you can flip a coin. If it lands on the side of the table, you do one option. And then there's also another thing where you have a cup. You take 3 cups and you fill it up with ice, and you're supposed to see which one melts first, and that one will tell you which character melted from the freeze ray gun first, right? Well, that path takes you down to some corny endings in this book, and I'm not going to lie, this part of the book is kind of cringe to me. There's one ending involving frogs that is just absolutely terrible. And most of the endings down this freeze ray gun path are very short and very brief and kind of corny. But the other one, if you decide to go to the dragon route, that has the more adventurous side of the book, but it does end kind of abruptly, and there's really not much else to say about it. There's not many scary scenes here. But if you go down the freeze ray gun path, it does take you to the true ending of the game's arc, and you end up realizing that Dare's tattoos pretty much form his body, and there's some pretty graphic imagery of him losing his tattoos, and there's just empty space in between tattoos that don't no longer have the tattoos that were lost in the games bonding it. And you and your brother have defeated him so much that he's essentially decided to send you back to either completely restart the game's arc, which is kind of stupid, but it is what it is, or you can go back and then wind up at the kids care center where Zoe was going to take you in the fun arc. And that's essentially the game's arc in a nutshell. Now, the arc I liked the most was the second one I experienced, and that was the fun arc. This is the arc that requires that you and Stinko end up at the kids care center with Zoe, who is revealed to be this hybrid human and rat person, like the cover here. And I'm not lying. it gets really involved in that subject matter here. So at the kids care center, you and your brother arrive, and before you can go through the turnstiles, your brother beelines for this thing called the bottomless ball pit. And he jumps in, and now your choice is to either jump in after him or find another way out of this place. And you can just leave him behind, essentially. Well, if you choose to go down the bottomless ball pit route, there are a few endings that end the story kind of abruptly. Prime example, if you curl up into a ball, it will bring you up back to the surface, but if you unclench yourself from a ball, you'll just fall endlessly down the pit forever. But if you choose the other option, you and your brother pretty much hold hands and you fall down through, and you get sucked through this chute of sorts, and it spits you out in this location that's pretty much surrounded. It's like a giant white room, and there's surrounding cages of human kids inside. And there's these human-rat hybrids kind of watching over these kids in these cages. And you go down this plot where you end up separated from your brother Stinko, and you uncover this thing. And let's just say it's a cheese pun, right? It's called Switch Cheese. And Switch Cheese allows you to change into a rat, depending on how much you eat. And there's one ending where you end up becoming a rat, and you end up freeing all the kids and saving everyone, and then it's hunky-dory, but you're still stuck as a rat. And then there's another ending where you don't eat enough of it, or you refuse to eat it, and they pretty much force you to become part of the kids care center forever. Which was kind of a stipulation that I forgot to mention with Dare, is that he essentially wants to take the kids and make them tattoos and become part of his kids care, involvement with his tattoos. For example, like he took Stinko and tried to turn him into a tattoo. Now that was pretty scary. But yeah, that's essentially the ball pit route. But there is a way to get into this thing called this cave side story here. And if you go through the cave side story, you end up encountering a bunch of rats who have essentially been experimented on by humans, and they've been pretty much left here. And one cave route essentially has you pretty much dying by being suffocated by rats. And then the other one ends up leading you to this laboratory of sorts where you discover that these rat people need saving. They need switch cheese to gain back their real form, and they need to be saved. Now, if you go down the correct route, you'll get the true ending of the book, and you'll end up saving the rat people with the switch cheese, and you all get to go home and presumably, but the main ending kind of implies that your parents are going to be staying longer than presumed, and or they have stayed longer than presumed. It's been 2 days, and you realize that you've been stuck there for multiple days, and I won't spoil the actual ending, but it's kind of okay. It's not really too bad. But one of my favorite arcs in the whole book is this side story, The Other Option, and it takes you down to this thing called the Tomb of the Unknown Rats, right? And this stuff is absolutely scary. They go down this cave system. You and your brother end up going down this cave system, and you uncover this wall of mummified rats, and the wall starts to enclose on you, and it's very claustrophobic and very scary. And there's this ending that involves you watching the walls collapse, and a rat falls into your mouth, and you can taste the dead rat in your mouth. It's disgusting and mortifying. And that ending probably was my favorite ending of the whole book. Now in this arc, now leading up to the true ending, I didn't mention this yet, there was a item pickup function that you had to pick up throughout the fun arc. If you chose certain paths, it led you to the cave system, and one of the endings allowed you to pick up a cassette tape. Now the cassette tape plays later on in the true ending, in one of the endings. I think there's 2 true endings. The other one involves you pretty much playing the cassette tape, right, that you gather. And if you don't have it, you have to pretty much go back to the beginning of the fun arc. But you play the sound, and it sounds like a bunch of cats, and it distracts the rats long enough for you to free all the kids, and you all escape. And there's a mad dash to get out of this experimental room. But there's a bombshell kind of bad ending for you when you discover what's going to become of you, when you realize that you might be there stuck for weeks because of your parents and something that happened to them. So, yeah. But that's the only other ending I consider the true ending of the book. And, yeah, that's essentially Attack of the Beastly Babysitter. So, let's start off with the compliments. I do want to say, off the bat, the game function of this book was kind of refreshing. It was more luck-based on most of the things. And I didn't even bring up one thing in the story, because I want you to be surprised by it. But there's more than just luck-based things. There's also trivia that gives a nod to a former Goosebumps book. I want y'all to be surprised by that, because I really enjoyed that piece. There's trivia. There's luck-based stuff with like the spinner, and you flipping a coin, seeing where it lands, getting a cup of ice, letting the ice melt to decide which person you're going to go with in your choice. It was kind of creative, but like I said, mostly luck-based. And then there's some puzzles here, mostly in the games arc, but they're very easy puzzles. You just like follow a string down a parachute, and it lands you on one option or the other, and one option will give you to a bad ending, the other one would take you further on. And then there's like another one that involves a maze, and you go through the maze, and same thing. But I will say, the games arc had the best gameplay to it, because you got to use the spinner, you got to flip coins landed on the side of tables, you got to melt ice in cups if you chose to. I appreciate that. I appreciate the effort. And on the fun arc, you got to use more puzzles and trivia, which I really dug. And there was a item pickup function with that cassette, like I said, that plays into one of the true endings of the book. And I thought that was really cool. And I thought that was a cool shakeup between both arcs. You don't use the same stuff. Now, I will say the disappointment with the fun arc is that it feels more textbook to these game books in this series, where most of them, if not majority of them, don't even have game functions. In the fun arc, minus the occasional puzzle or occasional trivia and the item pickup, there's nothing much here. So with that being said, though, I did like the game function on both sides. Now, I think the fun arc is probably the arc I would recommend from this book. It might not be for everyone. There are a bunch of corny dialogue, some cringy scenes involving these human rat hybrids. I'm not gonna lie. Some of these endings are really corny in both arcs here. But the fun arc just seemed something more up my alley. Going to like a daycare center, seeing a bottomless ball pit, ending up in like this experiment room, ending up in some cave system. The Tomb of the Unknown Rats was probably the best part of the book, next to the gameplay function. This is where I had all my fun in the book, right? I had the most fun here because it seemed more wild and more in my taste range, and the endings were a little more darker and less corny than the games side. But not saying it's not without its faults though. But the other arc, the games arc, this one was more okay. If I'm being honest, the games arc wasn't that spectacular. It started off really good, right? It started off using the spinner function. It had some really decent setup with Dare. You're like, okay, where's this going to go? You end up in this black hole pit in the middle of the desert. And I'm like, oh, where are we going to go with this? And then it just goes down the nonsensical route where you end up using ray guns and just going down the generic route of fighting a dragon. And the dragon stuff was mostly just textbook, fantasy stuff you've seen before. But the ray gun stuff is where you got all the cringy endings of this book. And I'm going to say, there's an ending involving frogs in this book that has to be the cringiest, worst ending I have ever read in a Give Yourself Goosebumps book, aside from a lot of the cringy endings I read in Trick or Trap, the special edition. It was bad. All the endings on this side on this side arc, I thought were terrible. Or they were really rushed and corny. I was not a fan of it, and that kind of brought me down because I think this arc had potential. And the one saving grace to it was Dare. Dare was a solid villain. He's like a villain made of tattoos, and he tries to absorb kids into his body. I thought that was a really cool angle to him, and he had a fun little personality to him. I just wish that he was given some better things to work with in this arc. He was so close to becoming a Dr. McDeath, but didn't have the scary endings. It didn't have the darkness to it. He had dark moments to him. And trust me, I will say my second favorite thing about this whole book, moment-wise, was when he tries to take your brother Stinko and turn him into a tattoo. So that's about it for the gameplay and the arcs. Now, running down the story elements and the characters, I thought Stinko, for being a little brother character, was fine. He was more just kind of there in the story. Didn't really have much to offer. He was cute, though. Cute enough. He's like a 6-year-old kid. But one thing I don't understand is why are we calling him Stinko? Like, what's his real name? Like, I just want to know his real name. I don't think I ever got it. Somebody let me know down in the comment section if you remember his name, because I don't know it. I never found it. And I thought it was just kind of mean of you to call your brother Stinko the whole book, and it honestly made you seem like a big old jerk. This is one of the Give Yourself Goosebumps books where you could essentially role play as a jerk, which some people might like and stuff, but it made parts of the story kind of just, it made me wince a little bit, because I'm just like, what's going on here? And like I said, as a whole, the setup was fun. The story elements was cool, but I don't really feel like I got something out of this book other than just pure enjoyment from the gameplay and the absurdity of the fun arc. The story here left a lot to be desired. I do think that the best storyline that you could possibly take is in the fun arc when you go down trying to rescue the rat people. That's probably the best thing in this whole book. Everything else was just kind of filler, but it works. It made it a fun time. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, I struggle with this one because honestly, I think the gameplay function is kind of standout in the way it's like designed and set up for each individual arc having more of a different focus of gameplay. I really love that. The fun arc, I would say, is above average. I thought it was really fun. But unfortunately, the games arc was a little below average, so it kind of balances out into the average for me. But for this being an average Give Yourself Goosebumps book, I still think it's good, and I still would recommend it. So, for all the problems I mentioned with like the corny endings, pretty much throughout the whole book, the game's arc being a slightly below average and disappointing, and not really getting much out of the book other than just the absurdity of the fun arc. I'd only deducted 1.3 points off the top, and I gave it a 3.7 out of 5. It's an average Give Yourself Goosebumps book, but I'm willing to say this is a good one. I would recommend this to people. I don't think it's nearly as bad as people made it out to be. For the people that I heard opinions from who said that this was a bad book, I'm just saying that this one's kind of just in the middle. I think it's good, solid enough, and I think everyone should check it out. You might love it, you might hate it, you might be in between, kind of like me. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Attack of the Beastly Babysitter. Let me know down in the comment section. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.